something has been building inside you for months, maybe longer. You can't name it yet. There's no event you can point to, no single moment where things cracked open. But something in your inner world has shifted, and the ground beneath your feet doesn't feel solid anymore. You wake up, and the life you built feels like it belongs to someone else. Relationships that once felt essential now feel like costumes you've outgrown. Goals you chased for years suddenly seem hollow, like you've been running toward a destination that was never actually yours. And underneath all of it, there's this quiet, relentless pressure, like something enormous is trying to surface but hasn't broken through yet. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying this exact phenomenon. He watched it unfold in patient after patient, and what he discovered about these periods of mounting inner pressure was both terrifying and profoundly hopeful. He found that the psyche doesn't change gradually. It accumulates tension in silence, reorganizes itself beneath conscious awareness, and then erupts into transformation so sudden and so total that the person experiencing it feels like their entire reality has been dismantled overnight. Jung didn't see this as breakdown. He saw it as the most important process a human being could undergo. And he warned that the people who resist it suffer far more than the people who let it happen. Today I'm going to show you what Jung discovered about why everything in your life is about to shift, the specific psychological mechanism that makes sudden transformation inevitable once it begins, why your psyche has been quietly preparing you for something you haven't consciously chosen, and how to navigate the coming upheaval without being destroyed by it. Because if you're feeling that pressure right now, that sense that something enormous is approaching, Jung would tell you that you're not imagining it. Your unconscious has already made a decision your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet, and what comes next will change everything. Jung observed a pattern so consistent across his patients that he considered it one of the fundamental laws of the psyche. He borrowed a term from the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus and called it enantiodromia, the principle that when anything in the psyche reaches its extreme, it transforms into its opposite, not slowly, not through careful deliberation, suddenly, violently, like a pendulum that's been pulled as far as it can go in one direction and then released. The further it was pulled, the more forceful the swing back. This principle operates in every dimension of psychological life. The person who has been endlessly accommodating suddenly can't tolerate one more request. The person who has been obsessively controlling discovers that control has been destroying everything they were trying to protect. The person who spent decades building an identity around success wakes up one morning feeling that the success itself is the prison. Nothing changed externally, but internally, the psyche reached its limit. The one-sidedness became so extreme that the opposite force, which had been building in the unconscious for years, finally broke through. Jung found that most people experience this as crisis. They think something is going wrong because everything they relied on stops working at once. Their motivation disappears. Their relationships become intolerable. Their carefully constructed life suddenly feels suffocating rather than satisfying. They go to their doctor thinking they're depressed. They tell their friends they're having a breakdown. They wonder if something is fundamentally broken inside them. But Jung saw something completely different happening. He saw the self, which is Jung's term for the totality of the psyche, the intelligence that operates far beneath conscious awareness, initiating a correction. The conscious personality had wandered too far in one direction. It had become too rigid, too identified with one way of being, too invested in a version of reality that no longer served the person's deeper development. And the self, which always moves toward wholeness, decided it was time to dismantle what had become a cage. The discomfort wasn't illness. It was the psyche doing exactly what it was designed to do. What makes this process feel so sudden is that the preparation happens entirely underground. Jung compared it to tectonic plates shifting deep beneath the Earth's surface. For years, nothing visible happens. The landscape looks stable, life proceeds normally, but pressure is accumulating along fault lines that no one can see. Then one day the earthquake arrives, and everyone thinks it came from nowhere. But it didn't come from nowhere. It was building the entire time. They just couldn't feel it because the movement was happening at a depth below ordinary awareness. Your psyche works the same way. The transformation that's about to happen in your life didn't start yesterday. It started years ago, when your unconscious began registering the gap between who you were pretending to be and who you actually are. Every time you silenced an instinct because it was inconvenient, your unconscious took note. Every time you stayed in a situation that violated your integrity, the pressure increased. Every time you performed a version of yourself that kept others comfortable while slowly killing something authentic inside you, another crack formed along the fault line. You didn't feel it happening because you were too busy managing the surface. But underneath, the forces of transformation were gathering. Jung identified specific signs that this underground reorganization is nearing the surface. The first is what he called a loss of meaning. Things that used to matter stop mattering. Not in a depressive way where everything feels heavy and dark. In a strange, detached way where you look at your life and feel nothing. The promotion you work toward for years arrives and you feel empty instead of triumphant. The relationship that defined your world suddenly feels like watching a movie about someone else's love story. Hobbies, friendships, routines that once gave your days structure become unbearably tedious. You're not sad about this loss. You're bewildered by it. Where did the meaning go? Jung explained that meaning doesn't disappear, it withdraws. When the psyche is preparing for transformation, it pulls its energy away from the old structures. Like blood retreating from the extremities to protect the vital organs during crisis. The things that lose meaning aren't being destroyed. They're being de-invested. Your psyche is reclaiming the energy it had distributed across your old life because it needs that energy for what's coming next. The emptiness you feel isn't loss. It's reallocation. Something inside you is gathering its resources for a massive shift. The second sign is intensifying dreams. Jung paid extraordinary attention to dreams because he considered them direct communications from the unconscious to the conscious mind. And he found that before major life transformations, dreams become vivid, disturbing, and impossible to ignore. Dreams of natural disasters, dreams of being in unfamiliar houses with rooms you've never seen, dreams of death that don't feel frightening but strangely peaceful, dreams of water, massive bodies of water, rising and flooding and reshaping the landscape. These aren't random, they're the unconscious telling you, in the only language it has, that the inner world is restructuring itself and the outer world is about to follow. The third sign is the collapse of tolerance. You suddenly can't stand things you've endured for years. The friend who always talks about themselves. The family dynamic where your role is to absorb everyone's anxiety. The job where you perform enthusiasm you don't feel. The relationship where you've been shrinking yourself to avoid conflict. One day you wake up and the tolerance is simply gone. not because something dramatic happened, because your psyche has decided that the cost of maintaining these arrangements now exceeds the cost of disrupting them. The unconscious has done its math. The equation no longer balances, and your sudden intolerance is the first visible sign that the internal restructuring has reached the surface. Jung warned that this phase is extraordinarily dangerous, not because the transformation itself is harmful, but because people panic when it begins and make one of two catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake is trying to force everything back to normal. They sense the ground shifting and grip harder. They recommit to the relationship that's dying. They throw themselves deeper into the career that's suffocating them. They perform enthusiasm with more intensity, hoping that if they just try harder, the old meaning will return. It won't. You cannot reinvest energy in structures your psyche has already decided to outgrow. Fighting the transformation doesn't prevent it. It just makes the eventual eruption more violent. The second mistake is premature action. They feel the pressure building and start blowing up their life impulsively. They quit the job without a plan. They end the relationship in a rage. They make declarations and ultimatums and dramatic exits that feel liberating in the moment, but create chaos they're not prepared for. Jung called this acting out the transformation instead of going through it. The energy of change gets discharged through external drama rather than being allowed to do its internal work. The person changes their circumstances but doesn't change themselves. And within a year, they've rebuilt the exact same patterns in a new setting because the real transformation never happened. The path Jung advocated was neither resistance nor impulsive action. It was conscious suffering. Staying present with the discomfort of transformation without trying to fix it, flee from it, or force it to resolve on your timeline. This requires a specific kind of courage that most people don't realize exists. The courage to not know, to sit in the space between who you were and who you're becoming, without demanding that the process speed up or slow down. To let the old identity dissolve without immediately grabbing for a new one. This is what Jung meant when he talked about the tension of opposites. Real transformation happens in the space between what's dying and what hasn't been born yet. The old self is losing its grip. The new self hasn't fully formed, and you're suspended in the middle, feeling like you're nothing and no one, belonging nowhere, fitting into nothing. Jung said this space is where the real work happens, not in the dramatic moment of change, in the unbearable waiting that precedes it. And this is where it gets interesting, because Jung discovered that what emerges from this process isn't just a better version of the old self, it's something qualitatively different. He called it the birth of the true personality, the version of you that existed before socialization, trauma, and adaptation buried it, the version that your entire life has been unconsciously moving toward, even when your conscious choices were moving away from it. If this process resonates with something you're feeling right now, if you're in that space between who you were and who you're becoming, our new guide, True Self-Discovery, offers 24 practical reflection exercises inspired by Jung's teachings. It's designed to help you navigate exactly this kind of inner transformation, not by giving you answers, but by helping you ask the questions your psyche is already trying to surface. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Jung found that the personality that emerges after sudden transformation has specific qualities that distinguish it from the performed self that came before. The first quality is what he called psychological sovereignty. The person stops organizing their life around other people's expectations, not out of selfishness or rebellion, but because the transformation burned away the part of them that believed their worth depended on external validation. They can still love, they can still connect, but they no longer contort themselves into shapes designed to make others comfortable. The need to be liked, approved of, included, has been replaced by something deeper, a relationship with themselves that doesn't require anyone else's permission. The second quality is integration of the shadow. Before transformation, most people operate from a carefully curated version of themselves. The acceptable parts are on display. The unacceptable parts, the anger, the selfishness, the ambition, the sexuality, the darkness, are hidden in the unconscious where they cause havoc without being acknowledged. After genuine transformation, these rejected parts have been faced and integrated. The person isn't pretending to be good anymore. They're whole, which means they have access to their full range of human capacity. They can be gentle and fierce, generous and boundaried, compassionate and ruthless, depending on what the situation demands. This wholeness is what Jung called individuation, and it's radically different from the one-dimensional goodness that most people perform. The third quality is what Jung described as alignment with fate, not fate in some mystical, predetermined sense, but the recognition that your life has a trajectory that your conscious mind didn't design, that there's an intelligence operating through your choices, your wounds, your seemingly random experiences that has been shaping you towards something specific. After transformation, people often look back at their entire life and see the pattern for the first time. The suffering wasn't random. The detours weren't mistakes. The things that felt like they were destroying you were actually dismantling the false structures that stood between you and who you were meant to become. This is why Jung said, sudden transformation feels like destruction while it's happening, but looks like destiny in retrospect. Because while you're in it, all you can see is what you're losing, the identity that's dissolving, the relationships that can't survive your growth, the life that no longer fits. But once you've passed through it, you see that everything that fell away needed to fall away, that the psyche wasn't destroying your life. It was clearing space for the life that was actually yours. But Jung was honest about the cost. Not everyone survives sudden transformation intact. Some people break under the pressure because they have no framework for understanding what's happening to them. They interpret the dissolution of their old identity as genuine mental illness. They medicate the process into silence. They let other people convince them that what they're experiencing is pathological rather than developmental, and the transformation stalls, half completed, leaving them in a worse state than before. Neither fully the old self nor fully the new one, stuck in the in-between with no map and no guide. This is why Jung spent so much of his career trying to give people language for the transformative process. He believed that understanding what's happening to you psychologically is itself a form of protection. When you know that the loss of meaning is your psyche reclaiming energy for transformation, you don't panic. When you understand that your sudden intolerance for old patterns signals growth rather than breakdown, you don't try to force yourself back into tolerance. When you recognize that the dreams, the restlessness, the strange sense of impending change are all evidence that your unconscious has already begun reorganizing itself, you can cooperate with the process instead of fighting it. Jung also emphasized something that most people overlook when they're in the middle of transformation. The timing isn't yours to control. The psyche has its own intelligence and its own schedule. You can't force yourself to transform faster because you're uncomfortable with the waiting. And you can't slow it down because you're afraid of what's on the other side. The unconscious has already determined the trajectory. Your job isn't to direct the transformation. Your job is to stay conscious while it happens, to witness what's dying without clinging to it, to feel the grief of what you're releasing without letting that grief pull you backward, to remain present in the disorientation without numbing yourself against it. This staying conscious is what separates people who are transformed by crisis from people who are simply damaged by it. The crisis itself is neutral. It's a force of psychological nature, neither good nor bad. What determines the outcome is whether you meet it with awareness or flee from it into unconsciousness. And fleeing doesn't always look like avoidance. Sometimes it looks like frantic activity, constantly doing, planning, fixing, solving, anything to avoid sitting still long enough to feel the full weight of what's shifting inside you. Jung would tell you that right now, in this moment, if you're feeling that unnamed pressure, that sense that something enormous is approaching, your only task is to pay attention, not to figure it out, not to plan for it, not to control it, just to notice what's happening inside you without judging it as good or bad, healthy or sick, progress or regression. The psyche knows what it's doing. It's been preparing for this far longer than you've been aware of it. And the transformation that's coming isn't going to ask your permission. It's going to happen because it must. Everything is about to change, not because the external world is shifting, although it might, but because the internal world has already shifted, and external reality always eventually conforms to what's happening inside. The relationships that can't hold who you're becoming will fall away. The environments that require the old version of you will become intolerable. The patterns that kept you safe when you were smaller will stop functioning because you've outgrown the safety they provide. This is the moment Jung spent his life studying, the moment before everything breaks open, the moment when the accumulated pressure of years of unconscious development reaches the surface and demands conscious participation. Most people who find themselves here think something is ending. Jung would tell you something is beginning, something that required the death of who you thought you were in order to reveal who you've been becoming all along. You cannot prepare for this in any conventional sense. You can't stockpile strategies or rehearse responses or build defenses against a force that's coming from inside your own psyche. The only preparation that matters is the willingness to let the old self go, to stop white-knuckling the identity you've outgrown, to stop performing the life that no longer has your energy behind it, to accept that the disorientation you feel isn't a problem to solve, but a passage to move through. Jung believed that the people who navigate sudden transformation successfully share one quality. They trust the process more than they trust their fear. Not blind trust, not passive acceptance, but a deep, grounded recognition that the psyche is intelligent, that the pressure they feel has purpose, that what's dissolving needed to dissolve, and that what emerges on the other side will be more real, more whole, and more alive than anything the old self could have constructed. This is what it means to prepare yourself, not gathering armor against the change, gathering the courage to stand undefended while the change moves through you, letting it dismantle what must be dismantled, letting it reveal what has been hidden, letting it rearrange your life according to a blueprint your conscious mind never drew, but your deeper self has been holding all along. Everything is about to change suddenly. Not because the universe is testing you, because your own psyche has decided that you're ready, that you've accumulated enough experience, enough suffering, enough awareness to survive the crossing from who you were to who you actually are. The only question left is whether you'll fight it or let it carry you. Jung spent a lifetime watching people face that question. And the ones who surrendered to the transformation, who let the old life die so the real one could begin, were the ones who finally understood what it meant to be fully, terrifyingly, beautifully alive. If you haven't yet, our new guide, True Self-Discovery, was created for exactly this moment. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, designed not to give you answers, but to help you listen to what your own psyche is already trying to tell you. Because the transformation doesn't need your direction, it needs your attention. Click below to get True Self-Discovery.